Hey friends, a quick reminder that for every $1 you give on patreon.com/thegaytheist manifesto, another YouTube shitlord sheds another tear. And we all know how delicious YouTube shitlord tears are. So head to patreon.com/thegaytheist manifesto and let's keep making the YouTube shitlords cry. Your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. This is the Atheist Manifesto. Hello and welcome to the Atheist Manifesto. I am your host, Callie Wright. Ari and I had a fantastic time this past weekend at the Pennsylvania State Atheist Humanist Convention. The con 2 years ago was only my second convention, and it was the first time I got to meet Brian Fields, who's the head organizer of the con. And I remember talking to him a little bit at Bill and Susie Robbins' house, and I mentioned my background as an audio engineer, and he told me then, we're always looking for volunteers to help with that kind of thing. And I remember thinking to myself that actually my goal is to be invited to speak at the next one. We'll see what happens. And I was invited to speak at this one, and it was a really good feeling. The title of my talk for this con was My Vagina, a Love Story. And I'm going to play the audio of my talk for you as this week's episode. As has become my style for con talks, it's a deeply personal story, and this is one of only 2 times I've gone on stage with no slides and just told stories. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed giving it. Good afternoon. Yeah. It's late enough that we can be enthusiastic, right? Everybody's had their caffeine and good stuff. So my name's Callie Wright, and I am here to tell you a love story. And the title of my talk, if you paid attention to the program, is My Vagina, a Love Story. Because what better way to demonstrate that we shouldn't make a big deal of trans people's genitals than for a trans woman to show up to a conference to talk about her genitals, right? Anyone who knows me probably couldn't miss the fact that I got a brand new shiny science vagina installed 2.5 months ago. Yeah. And I kind of haven't shut the fuck up about it since. But for those who don't know me, there it is. I'm a trans woman, and I had my sex reassignment surgery July 31st this year. And I got to be honest at the top here and tell you that the love story I'm going to tell is not the story that you may infer from the title of my talk. The story that I'm going to tell is the story of the love that set me on this path and made it possible for me to be who I am. It's the story of me learning to love myself and to feel like I was worthy of happiness. If I were to write this story out as a 3-act play, it might look something like, Act 1, what the fuck is wrong with me? Act 2, hey, it's okay to be who you are. And Act 3, you get to realize the dream of being more or less at peace with your body and your life in general. And so in Act 1, I ask the question that really starts this whole journey, the question that took me some of my childhood, all of my teen years, and most of my 20s to answer. What the fuck is wrong with me? Obviously, I don't think that question is unique to trans people. Honestly, I'd be surprised to meet a single person who hasn't asked themselves that question at least once or twice in their lives. And in a lot of ways, it's a toxic question, right? Like, it assumes that there is something wrong with you. Is that even helpful? And contrary to what our societal programming may tell us, there may not be, in fact, anything wrong with you. But that's where I was as a kid in the lunchroom at Fairfield West Elementary when I was in 5th grade. And this was my trans light bulb moment. My friend David was out sick that day. He and I would always sit at the lunch table arguing over whether Star Trek or Star Wars was better. And the answer is Star Trek, of course. Thank you. But he was out sick that day, and he was really the only friend that I had in my class at the time, so I was just kind of sitting there alone, stewing in my own thoughts, and I'd known something wasn't quite right for a while But it was then that it really, really hit me. And puberty was starting for most of the kids in my class. And I watched the boys walk by and I watched the girls walk by. And it hit me. I was supposed to be a girl. And I felt it so strongly and so deeply that I had this irresistible urge to say the words out loud. And I turned my head away so no one would see me, and I whispered softly to myself, I was supposed to be a girl. And so I knew that I was meant to be a girl, and I also knew, based on the messages that I'd gotten about gender at the time, that thinking that meant there was something incredibly, incredibly wrong with me. Some kid in my class once dared to admit that he liked purple, and that didn't go well for him, so what the hell would happen to me? You know? And so as a kid, I asked the what the fuck is wrong with me question a lot. Because 20 odd years ago, there was no messaging I got anywhere in society that allowed me not to assume there was something seriously wrong with me. And despite all this, that year I got just a little brave. And I suggested to my mom that I wanted to be a girl for Halloween. And this isn't an uncommon thing for closeted trans folks to do. I figured if there was a way I could pull off dressing and looking like a girl without giving away my secret, this was the way to do it. And my mom loved it. My mom ate it up. My friends thought it was hilarious. And of course, I had to play along about how hilarious it was. And my mom went out and bought the biggest, most hilariously huge bra she could find, and we filled it with water balloons. And she got this kind of cute, like, fake denim dress from JCPenney and a cheap wig from a Halloween store. And it's a deep regret in my life that I don't have pictures left over from that. Because I looked fucking ridiculous. Like, of course I did. But I loved every minute of it. And the next day, I had to put it all away and pretend that was the end of it. And that wasn't a fun day. What the fuck is wrong with me? My cousin Mark and I used to be super, super close. And he spent the night at my house one time, and we got to talking about Halloween costumes. And this was just a few months later. And I decided that I was going to start trying on Halloween costumes for the next year. And of course, this was code for I want an excuse to find some of my mom's clothes to try on. And my mom had this closet cabinet thing in the basement just outside my room, and I went rooting through it to find a dress that I liked, and I found this super cute floral thing that weirdly enough seemed to fit me, so I tried it on, and Mark laughed at me, and he told me that when you grow up, you're going to end up as a crossdresser. Like, that's a bad thing. And without being unnecessarily petty, I'll just say that I think my life choices and his life choices have illustrated to me that I was on the right side of that equation. But his judgment still hurt. What the fuck is wrong with me, right? A few years later, I ended up living with my aunt for about a week. Her husband was out of town for his job, and she was afraid of being alone, so I stayed with her to keep her company. And this was awesome for me because my aunt had HBO, and HBO had porn. So this was a win-win situation, right? She got company, I got porn, it was win-win. And I stayed in her basement. She had this big-ass console TV with an original Atari and like 50 games, and of course, the aforementioned HBO with the aforementioned porn. And as kids tend to do, I got to exploring her house a little bit. And she had these bins of clothes that she never wore stacked underneath the basement stairs. And I got curious, and I started digging through those boxes. And I found this super cute, skimpy bikini thing in one of these boxes. And, knowing what I know about myself, knowing, like, my aunt's already in bed. If she opens the door and comes downstairs, like, this is my chance, right? So I took all my clothes off, and I tried to get this bikini on. And it's 100% as awkward as the picture you have in your head. And so after spending like 20 minutes as a contortionist trying to get this thing on, I had a good look at myself in the mirror, and I got just a split second of, wow, this is awesome, before my brain ran in to ask me just what the fuck was wrong with me. And of course, I was overwhelmed by guilt and shame. Like, I was a boy, not just wearing girls' clothes, but a bikini. Come on. What the fuck is wrong with me? And in Act 2 of my story, I start to think that maybe it might be okay that I'm different. I was already a Star Trek fan at the time, And of course, this was well before Netflix or any of that kind of stuff. And my mom didn't have the money to rent me all of VHS tapes or buy the VHS tapes. Like, I just had to catch them when they came on TV, right? And Star Trek appealed to me for a lot of reasons that I could probably do the rest of this weekend of a talk on why I like Star Trek. But for the purposes of this talk, I'm just going to mention one. And Star Trek was the first time that I ever saw a world where people being different didn't matter. And in fact, a lot of times, people being different was something to be excited about. And so for obvious reasons, this was very appealing to me. And then I saw an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation called The Outcast. And the short version of the story is that the first officer meets and falls in love with a member of a species that has no concept of gender. And this episode was meant to be an allegory for homosexuality, but it stumbled onto a lot of commentary about trans issues as well. And they have the awkward conversations like, how do you have sex? How does procreation work? Who leads when you dance? The 90s references to the battle of the sexes. And eventually it's revealed that Commander Riker's love interest is actually one of a member of her species that occasionally is born with gender. And this is seen as a backwards and anachronistic thing and a defect to be corrected by intensive psychological treatment. You're seeing the parallels, right? And she's found out by her government, and she's whisked away by the authorities to be cleansed of her unclean urges. And there's a trial scene where she's commanded to admit her perversion and acknowledge her need for help fixing what's wrong with her. And in this scene, she delivers a monologue that changed my life. I am female. I was born that way. I've had those feelings, those longings all of my life. It is not unnatural. I am not sick because I feel this way. I do not need to be helped. I do not need to be cured. What I need, and what all of those who are like me need, is your understanding and your compassion. We have not injured you in any way, and yet we are scorned and attacked, and all because we are different. What we do is no different from what you do. We talk and laugh. We complain about work. We wonder about growing old. We talk about our families and we worry about the future. And we cry with each other when things seem hopeless. All of the loving things that you do with each other, that is what we do. And for that we are called misfits and deviants and criminals. What right do you have to punish us? What right do you have to change us? What makes you think you can dictate how people love each other? And of course, there's never any single thing that fixes all of your problems for you, but this was the first time I'd ever received a clear message that there may not, in fact, be something the fuck wrong with me. And it still took me until I was 28 to come out. I had a very sizable what the fuck is wrong with you shaped hole to climb out of. And I want to make it clear that there were never any outright hateful messages that I'd gotten from my close friends or my immediate family that would make me think they wouldn't accept who I was. For most of my life, being trans was something that the people in my life just had no concept of. And my fear was for society and the rest of the world and what it would mean for my life if I came out and transitioned. And in a lot of ways, my story after coming out is sort of the culmination of all of the times my friends and my family simply created space for me to be who I was. And the story of me getting from what the fuck is wrong with you to, yeah, it's fine that you are who you are, is a story of hundreds of interactions with the people in my life that very slowly chipped away at the idea that there was something wrong with me. And in Act 3 of my story, I get to finally become the person I've always known myself to be. And I owe that to several acts of astonishing love, kindness, and generosity. I'll never forget the first time a stranger looked me in the eye and told me there was nothing wrong with who I was. It was the first support group meeting I ever went to. And I'd come out to at least one or two of my friends previous to this, and they'd been amazingly loving and supportive, and they gave me the courage to go seek out other people who were like me in person. And so I found a local support group, and I resolved that I was going to go. And I sat in the parking lot shaking and crying because I was so scared. I was more scared than I'd ever been in my life. What the hell was I going to find inside this place? I still had a lot of internalized transphobia at the time. Was I going to go in and these people were just going to be a bunch of weirdos I didn't want anything to do with? What if they didn't like me? What if I'm not trans enough? Am I supposed to dress up? Are they going to be weirded out by the fact that I was still presenting as a dude and using my birth name? A good friend of mine called me. She knew I was planning to do this, and she knew it was about time. And she was actually the first person that I'd ever confided in about being trans. And she said, Callie, with all the love I can muster, hang up the fucking phone, get out of your fucking car, and go inside. So I did. And of course, I went inside, and I met real people. Some of whom were great, and some of whom who later turned out to be awful, but people who had the same experience as me. And I think almost anyone can recognize the value of being among your people, right? I mean, we're all here at this conference. And they went around the circle and people told their stories and talked about the things they were struggling with. And it came to me and I didn't know what to say. And if you know anything about me, I'm not usually a person at a loss for things to say. But I didn't know where to start, right? So I just sort of stumbled through some of the stories I told at the beginning of this talk, and I ended with something along the lines of, I'm not really sure where that leaves me, but I'm pretty sure I'm trans, and I don't really know what to do about that. And the woman leading the support group was sitting just to my left, and she looked me dead in the face, and she said, well, that's okay. It's okay to not be sure where you're at or where you're going. That's why we're here. We're not here to direct you or influence you or tell you what to do. We're here to hold your hand and help you through whatever your journey ends up being. And it's one thing to hear that from people who already love and support you, but hearing it from a stranger, someone who exists out there in the world, that was a different thing entirely. And of course, my self-doubt wasn't totally erased, but this gave me the boost I needed to set the rest in motion. And of course, we're talking about actually transitioning now, and this is the scariest and most exciting thing ever. And it's important to know that transition is not always pretty. There's not always a straight line from who I was to who I want to be. It's scary, it's complicated, and sometimes it's soul-destroying. But of course, the ultimate outcome is hopefully a positive one, right? We finally get to be the person we've always known ourselves to be. We use a name that fits us better. We use pronouns that fit us better. An outside appearance that fits us better. Social and emotional interactions that fit us better. But getting there, at least for me, was a process of both soaring happiness and soul-destroying disappointment and a constant roller coaster ride between the two. And I could take the entire rest of this weekend to talk about the process in depth, but the title of the talk has the word vagina in it, right? So let's go there. Of course, one of the ultimate messages that we get in society as trans people is that it's a sign of some kind of dangerous mental defect, that we want to change our bodies in this way. And to be honest, I had sort of a weird cognitive dissonance in my head about this for a while. On one hand, I knew I wanted hormones, and I knew I probably wanted breast implants, and that was all fine and normal in my head, but getting your penis surgically turned into a vagina, that's crossing the line. There's got to be something wrong with someone who wants to have that kind of change made to their body. And on top of that, it seemed like something that would be entirely out of my reach anyways. I had no idea that insurance would ever cover it. I didn't have insurance at the time, and self-paying for that kind of surgery is like $20,000 or $30,000. But in retrospect, what I was really doing was talking myself out of it because I thought I'd never be able to get it. I'm not a wealthy person. At the time, I hadn't had insurance for 10 years, and I didn't see any prospect of getting it soon. And it was overwhelming, thinking about the cost of the surgery and all the ancillary stuff like travel and food and money for bills while I was recovering and so on. But deep down, I knew I needed this. And I knew sex had always been awkward, and on some level, I even understood why sex had always been awkward. The first time I was ever penetrated during sex, I knew this is what needs to happen. But pretending that I didn't need it was less painful than acknowledging that need and knowing that I'd never be able to do it. And as luck would have it, I ended up getting a different job with insurance that covered surgery about a year after this. Now, another thing that you might know, if you're someone who's been following my endless barrage of vagina updates, is that my fiancée Celeste and I had our surgeries at roughly the same time. Mine was about a week after hers. Expressions of awe at the cuteness of that are enthusiastically encouraged. But thank you. And it may seem like this huge romantic gesture and this like really cute thing to do together, but the truth is our reasons for doing it were mostly practical. If we did it separately, we'd have to wait a year apart, and we'd have to each take the time off work to care for each other, and we'd have to pay for travel and lodging and food and all that twice. So for some of the practicalities and the logistics, it made sense to do it this way. But again, we're not rich. Like, money was still a huge thing for us. And I did some math, and I figured out that this whole ordeal was going to cost us about $20,000. And this was made possible by yet 3 more acts of astonishing love and generosity. My dad passed away almost exactly a year ago. He and I never really had much of a relationship. We did talk for a period of time, and the entire set of circumstances is way beyond the scope of this talk, but suffice it to say it was a really complicated situation. But I was in contact with his side of the family, and they'd never been anything but amazing to me, and my uncle had financial guardianship over my dad, and when he died, my uncle passed all the money my dad had on to me. And I was told that was the plan from the beginning. There was some level of knowledge that my dad's life probably wouldn't be a long one. And this started with my grandma. She's been dead almost 10 years now. And the plan was always that whatever money there was, when my dad died, would come to me. And there's no way to make up for my dad's absence in my life, right? But it was something. And my dad, though he never chose to be a part of my life, had, in a roundabout way, given me this really profound gift. And he's not alive for me to say thank you. And I think that'll always bother me. And though the money that we got from that was significant, it still wasn't everything that we needed. And Celeste and I decided that we were going to try to crowdfund the rest and make up for any shortfall that was left over by getting loans. And we didn't exactly meet the goal we set, but thankfully our trip ended up costing a little bit less than we expected. So when it's all said and done, we'll about break even. And that's one of those times where you think like, gosh, coincidence, right? Supernatural and God and destiny and meant to be and all that silly things. But at any rate, our friends shared and supported through, $5, hundreds of dollars, and they got us there, right? They made it possible for this thing to happen. And of course, the third radical act of love came from our moms, who each took weeks of their time to fly out to California and take care of us. And they helped us with cooking and going to the bathroom and cleaning ourselves and emotional support. And they sat with us in hospital rooms and exam rooms and learning all of the intimate details of our genitals and our surgeries and our recoveries and doing everything they could to help us get through this long and difficult process. And to them, it was an obvious thing. They're moms. It's what moms do. Of course, it's a little different when your kids are in their late 20s and early 30s, so it felt different to us, but to them it was obvious. They're always going to take care of their babies. And we recognize not everyone is this lucky, and we're deeply, deeply grateful for that. Something that I often try to point out in my activism is that I'm sort of the poster child for what can happen when things go right. From the very beginning, I've been met with love and support in my journey. And anything that I've achieved, any progress that I've helped make, any impact that the show or our activism may have made is a direct result of starting from that place of love and support. The podcasts, the talks, the activism, they are all what they are because of how often I've been met with love and support on this journey. Had my friends and family and community not acted the way they had, I don't think I would be standing here talking to you. And it's not an exaggeration to say that I might not even be alive. And I'm not one of those like hippy-dippy liberal types that thinks love is the solution to literally every problem in the world. And I'm really annoyed by like, love trumps hate. It's a sad fact that love doesn't always trump hate, right? My point is that love can be an incredible start, though. Imagine what our world would be like if everyone's trans story sounded like mine. Imagine what life would be like if everyone's friends were as supportive as mine. Imagine what it would be like if everyone came out and was welcomed into a community as I've been welcomed into this one. Imagine how happy those lives would be. Imagine what we could accomplish. Imagine the positive impact that we could have if we were not burdened by the hate and antipathy that many of us face in society. So I encourage you to imagine what this world could be like. And I encourage you to think on what you might be able to do to help create such a world. And I encourage you to go out and do that thing. Thank you.
And that, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of the Atheist Manifesto. We are a proud member of the Trans Podcaster Visibility Initiative. We are a group of trans podcasting badasses working to bring more trans voices into podcasting and other content creation. Search for the Trans Podcaster Visibility Initiative on Facebook for more info. You can find the show on Facebook at facebook.com/thegatheistmanifesto. You can email us at thegatheistmanifesto@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter at GatheistCallie, and you can find the show on Twitter at TheGatheists. If you want to support the show and the activism we do, you can head to patreon.com/thegatheistmanifesto and make a per episode donation as little as $1 per episode. You can also head over to iTunes and give us a 5-star review. That helps us get heard by more people and move up in the rankings. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, knows that you're capable of amazing things and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is the Atheist Manifesto.